So, you want an electric unicycle, but you're not sure if you can handle one, or you're at where I was at about a week ago. Now, before I begin, I want to mention that I'm going to throw out a lot of brands, and I'm not sponsored by anybody. This is just in case you're wondering what works well with me might work well with you. So I'm just throwing the names out there. For the past couple of months, I've been wanting an electric unicycle, and so I've been doing a lot of research and seeing exactly which one I wanted. Originally, I wanted the Kingsong S22, I think it was, that had the full suspension, but then it not only got pushed back in production, but there was that one that caught fire. And the last thing I want really is a unicycle to catch fire. So I went with my second choice, the Veteran Sherman Max. Some things that I liked about the Veteran Sherman were its 100-mile range, which I didn't really need, but I'll get back to that. It also has a top speed of 45 miles an hour, which again, I didn't really need, but it gives me that much more room to work within. As far as the battery capacity, a 100-mile range now is maybe a 50-mile range 10 years from now. So 10 years from now, it'll still be a very usable EUC. And most of the time I've found I don't even go past 20 miles an hour, which means that the batteries and the motor are going to be under stress throughout its entire use. And I immediately realized how hard it was to learn. Now, I've had many years of experience with not only bicycles, but motorcycles and some dirt riding. I started riding on the street ever since 2014 or something like that, and I've ridden in the dirt long before that. So I figured those skills would make me master this in the first 24 hours. However, none of those skills apply. Maybe if you're really into motocross, which I wasn't into like racing or anything like that, the skills that you have gained using your body as leverage might transfer into EUC riding. But I'm not that aggressive at dirt riding, so I couldn't really say. So basically, I was starting at ground zero. And the first thing I did is I tried to just hop on it. And I realized it just wants to fall over left and right. And at first I thought maybe there was something wrong with the unicycle, or maybe there was something wrong with me. And then so I took a break. I hopped on YouTube and looked up some tutorials, which I'm sure if you're watching this, you've already seen all of them. And I realized, it takes a lot of trial and error until you finally get it. Now, almost every YouTuber out there that I've seen that explains how to ride an electric unicycle the first time, almost specifically, if not specifically, mentions to not get a Veteran Sherman as your first electric unicycle. Its size is moderate. The size isn't that much of a concern. Honestly, being a taller unicycle makes it easier. The problem is it weighs 80 pounds, which doesn't sound like that much of a deal because it supports its own weight. But when it comes to countering any kind of motion that's already set in motion, it's that much more kinetic energy that you have to handle. I honestly, after the first day, I seriously considered buying a cheap $800 EUC just to learn on. I was on Amazon looking at InMotion's cheapest EUCs, and I was seriously thinking about buying an $800 one just to learn on. But honestly, at the end of the day, do a lot of research, find out which EUC you ultimately want because it fits your needs. There's no best EUC out there, but this one fit all my needs. So ultimately, this is the one I wanted to spend my money on, and even if it was difficult to learn, I would get there eventually. Now, one nice feature about the Veteran Sherman, and I'm sure a lot of other ones have it, is you can set a custom tiltback speed or a custom beeper speed. I wish the beeper would stop beeping after a while, but it doesn't. But the tiltback I set at 40 miles an hour because the EUC will do a top speed of 45. Actually, I don't think it would let me set it at 40. It's a little bit lower than 40. And then the speed limit beeper I set to just under 20 miles an hour. Because the problem with EUC regulations right now is they're very inattentive. They set a regulation for what they thought was good, so long ago, and then nobody's paid attention to it ever since then. Meanwhile, the technology has gotten significantly better for PEVs, personal electric vehicles. Because back in the day when they made it, it was just people riding electric scooters powered off of car batteries or even electric bicycles. So they determined that you only need 750 watts of power going through that motor. That's about half of a household motor. That's like a 1 horsepower motor, which is a stupid law because you can have as much power. You can have 2,000 horsepower in your street legal car. It doesn't matter because you have a speed limit, which is the other part of the PEV rules in most states, is you have a speed limit of 20 miles an hour, which I agree with. You should be able to have as much power as you want. Because the problem is, you're not going to find an EUC that's even worth riding under 750 watts. This veteran Sherman is 2,600 watts, significantly higher than it. But I set my beeper to 20 miles an hour, so I know I'm not breaking the speed limit. And I follow all the same rules as a cyclist. It should make no difference having 2,600 watt motor or a 3,400 watt motor. Makes no difference. It just means that you can control it better, if anything. I'm not going to be going over 20 miles an hour in a bicycle lane, and I'm going to stay off the sidewalk as much as possible because sidewalks are for people on feet, not people on bicycles or electric unicycles. So to start, my truck has a whole bunch of handprints all over it because what I did is I would stand on it and I would balance and walk myself around my truck using it as a brace, and then I would change directions and walk it the other way. And even that was so difficult that I thought I was never going to get it, but I didn't want to give up. I took about a 30-minute break and I watched some more tutorial videos on first time riding an EUC, and the one that really helped was the half moon or the circles. Basically, you plant 1 foot on one side and 1 foot on the ground, or just the front ball of your foot on the ground. And you use your dominant foot as like a throttle, and you move the EUC forward and you move it back. And you just keep doing that because you're building new motor function that your body never had before. And then eventually you go into full circles until you feel comfortable with doing continuous circles that you're not losing your balance or anything like that. And then, okay, so I got that down. What do I do now? So I took another short break, watched some more tutorial videos, and I noticed another thing they kept mentioning is you basically get on with 1 foot and you kick with the right like it's an old Razor scooter. And you practice just coasting. And then when you get good at coasting a couple feet at a time, you try getting your foot on the pedal. And I just did that for the entire evening and then the next morning. Soon after that, I was actually able to balance for short distances. I'm talking about like 100 feet at a time at the most. So I kept doing that up and down the driveway, or the little cul-de-sac deal that I got going on. And I started getting better at that. And then I started getting cocky. So there's a small neighborhood street that I kept riding up and down. And my biggest fear by that point was losing control and letting it loose into a car. Luckily, that never happened. But my skills started rapidly improving to the point where I took it to a larger neighborhood street and I was going up and down that without hopping off. It wasn't very stable. I could barely keep in a straight line, but then I decided I was going to push it. I wanted to feel what 25 miles an hour felt like. So I did about 20 miles an hour before I got the speed wobbles. Now at this point, I'd already spent about 3 or 4 hours that morning just practicing, and about 2 to 3 hours the evening before that. So my legs were pretty toast. My ankles were weak, my knees were weak, my hips were weak, my back was weak. When you have that deadly combination, you get what a lot of pickup truck drivers call the death wobbles. A lot of motorcycle drivers call tank slappers. Basically, the wheel wants to oscillate rapidly back and forth. And this could be a mechanical problem, which is really easy to find out if you pick up the wheel and you spin it back and forth. And if you see any wobble to the wheel, you got mechanical damage. But 99% of the time, you're gonna get death wobbles or the shimmies from just being tired. So as soon as I started hitting about 20 miles an hour, I started getting the shimmies. And so naturally, I just wanted to gradually slow down. But the more I slowed down, the more my position changed, which caused the shimmies to get worse. And I eventually bailed. And I was staying upright on the toes of my feet, trying to sprint away from it. And if you don't know this, you bail off of an EUC and they become an 80-pound boomerang, because the way you turn on them is you lean. When you jump off of it, it has nothing better to do but to start leaning until it falls down, which means it turns and does a full 360 and comes back for your legs. So I had an 80-pound sledgehammer slam into my leg, and they're still a little purple and yellow right now, but they got pretty banged up. And I was in the early stages of learning, so I wasn't really wearing a jacket or any kind of protective gear except for a helmet. So my legs were pretty banged up, my elbow. Luckily, I just got some nasty scabs along my arm, but it could have been worse. And while we're on the topic of safety gear, from my experience with not only motorcycles, but also now a week of electric unicycles, I would highly recommend a helmet. I would not ride anything without any kind of helmet. Anything that goes over running speed, you should have a helmet. And as you can see right now, I just have a Bontrager all-purpose like road and mountain helmet on. And that's fine, as long as you're going bicycle speeds or slower, which is like 20 miles an hour. Realistically though, I do want a better helmet. I just haven't decided. Now, one problem I've seen is a lot of other EUC riders always have these mountain bike grade helmets on that have a chin bar or some kind of facial protection, which I would also recommend. But the problem isn't that. It's that they're wearing mountain bike grade helmets, and a lot of them are going over 20 miles an hour. Now, if you never intend on going faster than a bicycle helmets are fine. There's one from Fox Racing that I really have my eyes on because it's extremely ventilated. It looks very comfortable, very light. But the problem is, when you start going faster than 20 miles an hour, you're going to want a motorcycle grade helmet or a motocross grade helmet. And what that means is either ECE or Snell rated. Don't ever trust DOT. DOT is just a sticker. For street use, I would recommend Snell. Snell has a little bit of controversy behind it because it's overkill in some areas that people say aren't that important. But for motorcycles, I just wear Snell anyways. For motocross, I would recommend the latest ECE standard, because for road and dirt, ECE is pretty on par with Snell, but they cover certain areas differently than Snell does, and they're generally a little bit lighter than Snell rated helmets. A lot of people don't like Snell helmets because they're heavy. I really don't notice a difference because you eventually build neck muscles. But I would definitely recommend getting an ECE rated motocross helmet if you want ventilation and protection at the same time. Now, down to body armor. Body armor I don't recommend so much. I am just getting up there in age, so I like back support. So I wear a back brace underneath this MTB armor, or off-brand MTB armor, which was a mistake, because it offers some back support. Now, this armor is an off-brand of some Fox Racing mountain bike armor that I had from years ago, but I bought that in a medium, and I've outgrown it a little bit, so I need a large. And I figured, well, they discontinued that armor, so maybe this company just picked it up and started making it, but that's not entirely true. It feels like a Halloween costume. There's no protection, and even the back brace doesn't support my back nearly as much as the original. But don't get Amazon body armor unless it's a name brand on Amazon. But for upper body, I would only really recommend elbows, because when I took a nasty spill, even some lighter spills, I always land on my hands and elbows. For the most part, at those speeds, you're going to be able to catch yourself. It's not like a motorcycle where you're going at speeds that you can't physically orient yourself in time. So elbow protection I would recommend it, especially while you're practicing, because I don't intend on wearing full body armor every time I ride in EUC. But when I practice, I like to push my limits, and I like knowing that I can get back up after a spill. Gloves are definitely a must. You always, whether you like it or not, catch yourself with your hands. So I would get some short cuff street bike gloves. These are just basic work gloves that I have right now, but previously, when I took my nasty spill, I was wearing some speed and strength gloves. They're really thick leather. They got gel palms and stuff like that. I did end up jamming my thumb, but the rest of my hand was fine. I didn't get any abrasion from it. Do not wear mechanics gloves. Even their quote unquote real leather ones aren't real leather. Get some real leather palmed gloves, or you're gonna have a bad time. Now for hip protection, I don't think it's really that necessary because, like I said, if you're going lower speeds, you're gonna catch yourself and your hips aren't gonna hit that hard. I have landed on my hips in a dirt accident while going pretty fast, and it hurt, and I didn't walk right for like 6 months. But on an EUC, I don't think you're really gonna need a hip protection. Knee protection, when it comes to knee protection, I didn't hit my knees in the few times that I've crashed, but riding in EUC is very demanding on your knees. So what I like to do is I wear knee braces or knee wraps underneath knee protection because your knees get tired, your ankles get tired, your hips get tired, your back gets tired. Your whole body, except your arms, get tired while you're riding. So any kind of brace that you have on hand, wear it. Any kind of brace that you can get your hands on, if that body part is getting sore, wear it. Because when you get sore, you get the shimmies and you get to feel what the ground feels like. You might notice that I'm wearing shorts. I don't normally recommend that, but I still have my entire legs covered. It's just really hot outside, so I like to wear shorts. But I still have my legs covered because I have tall boots, knee braces, shorts. It all ends up being long pants anyways. Boots, you could realistically wear any kind of shoe, but like I said, if you have any kind of braces or supports, I would wear them. So if you have over the ankle boots that you can tie relatively tight to give you ankle support, I would wear them. I ran into that tan wall behind me before on a mini bike. Brakes just decided to not work at all. Now that I've gone on my safety gear tangent, let's get back to first time riding. So you're finally riding in straight lines. It's great. I would find a large parking lot that doesn't get used, preferably without cars and any kind of poles that might get in the way. And honestly, the more uneven the parking lot is, as long as it doesn't have potholes like sudden hazards, I would use that one. Like this parade grounds is very uneven. It's got these 10 by 10 foot concrete squares, and every single crack is slightly uneven, but there's no ledges. It's just, they're bumps. So it kind of helps you build your balance skills while also giving you a large area to learn in. And basically, I went out to these parade grounds and I started doing my straight lines until I got a good feeling for it. And then I started doing medium speed zigzags. I would just kind of curve left and right. And then I would alternate between that and just going back to straight lines again. And then eventually I started getting a hang of it. And then with electric unicycles, you kind of have to learn how to run before you can walk, and you have to learn how to walk before you can crawl. So I started everything with about medium speeds, like 10, 15 miles an hour. And as I got better, I started practicing lower speeds, like 5 to 10 miles an hour. I started doing straight lines, going slower, because the slower you go, the less angular momentum you have, and the less stability you have. So as you start getting better, you start going slower. You practice slower speeds, because by this point, I still wasn't comfortable enough to ride on sidewalks, because sidewalks are very narrow. Sidewalks psych you out, because if you think that you're going to go off the side of the sidewalk, you're going to go off the side of the sidewalk. So you need to practice your slow speed riding. Eventually, I started trying to turn around one of these 10 foot by 10 foot squares, and I kind of did an imaginary figure 8 track. And I would just kind of like zoom out a little bit, find another square, do more, or 2 squares, do more figure 8s until I got comfortable with that. And then I tried to turn around in a single square until I got good with that. And then by the end of that session, I decided to try some dirt. Now electric unicycles are not like learning on a bicycle your first time. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people, the first time they learn how to ride a bicycle, practice on dirt, because dirt gives you a little bit of stability on a bicycle and also a little protection when you fall. You can't get road rash on dirt. But on an electric unicycle, dirt is your worst enemy for learning. When you're on pavement and you twist your body, when you're on pavement and something causes your electric unicycle to twist, you have all that traction to keep your electric unicycle from twisting. It's a lot more stable. When you're on dirt, you have no twist grip or yog grip, whatever you want to call it. And so that makes it twice as hard to ride on dirt, because the electric unicycle's always got your forward and back tilt covered. Even going up and down hills, it always compensates even if it slips a little bit. But you're sliding left and right and twisting left and right. You have no twist traction, and you have significantly less sliding traction. So start on pavement. And when you finally get that down, immediately go to riding on dirt. Ride on gravel. Ride on anything that's not entirely loose. Do not ride on sand. Do not ride in like riverbed pebbles, because I've tried that and it doesn't end well. But the reason I emphasize on this is because it really fast tracks your ability to balance. At this point, I still wasn't riding on sidewalks, because sidewalks were too narrow and sidewalks were too sketchy. But I spent an entire day riding on dirt. And by entire day, I mean about 2 hours. But I spent that whole session riding on dirt. And then the next day I went out, and it's just, I had it mastered. I went straight into riding sidewalks. I went straight into riding up and down dirt mounds. And realistically, like, this is just my first week of electric unicycle, but it was only 5 days, because I had the first day where I was getting nowhere. I had the second day where I got cocky and I got in an accident. And then there was Mother's Day weekend, so there's 2 days that I didn't ride at all. And then I had the third day when I went out to the parade grounds, started practicing on pavement. There's the fourth day when I finally started going into dirt. And then there's today where I pretty much mastered it. And then there's today where I feel pretty much competent enough to ride this as a mode of transportation and also make this video. Now, let's move on to one of my favorite subjects, tires. Tires are one of my favorite subjects because no matter what kind of bike you have, or what kind of electric unicycle you have in this case, it can dramatically change the ride characteristics of it. There's so many different kinds of tires out there. Do not rely entirely on the manufacturer's tire. The problem I've seen with a lot of brands is they use off-brand tires. It's like, I've had off-brand tires, they're all right, but when you only have one of them to rely on, I want a pretty good tire. And I really like Kenda tires from my experience with off-road travel and dirt tires. I really like the Kenda 50/50 tires they make, and they also make the street legal 10% off, 10% on-road and 90% off-road ones. They're the most aggressive street legal tires you can get. So Kenda makes really good tires. They're not just mountain bike tires. They make good dirt bike tires. And the type of tire matters too. I like that the Sherman, veteran Sherman, chose probably the best tire I think they could have put on there. It's a trials tire. Now the difference between a dirt tire and a trials tire is a dirt tire is a knobby type tire, and it has the knobs evenly distributed around the roundness of the tire. So you're riding on about half of the knobs when you're standing completely upright and going straight. and then a quarter of them are reserved for leaning left, and a quarter of them are reserved for leaning right, but you don't get to use those when you're standing straight up. A trials tire is designed to have all the knobbies pointing straight down at the ground. And on top of that, a trials tire is meant to be run on the lowest air pressure possible. Because if you ever look at a trials bike, it's basically like a hybrid between a mountain bike and a dirt bike. They're standing straight up most of the time. You look at a motocross bike and you have to pitch that bike pretty low when you're getting really aggressive in the turns. So you need side knobs with that. You're not doing that on an electric unicycle. You're straight up and down most of the time. And even in your most aggressive turns, you're really not leaning it as much as you think you're leaning it. So trials tires are honestly what I think is the perfect pick as a tire type, because you have 100% traction when you're standing straight up. And one thing I should have mentioned earlier is tire pressures. I got my EUC out of the box. It had 40 PSI, and they always do this. It's not just EUCs. I got a Coleman mini bike in the mail, and it had like 50 PSI in the tire. The reason they do this is for shipping. They don't want it to lose that bead during shipping. So they always store them at high pressures. And you immediately need to check your tire pressure. And so what kind of tire pressure do you put on? There's no gas tank with a sticker on it that tells you what the tire pressure needs. There's no door sill with a tire pressure sticker that says what the manufacturer has tested it with and says that it needs to be. That's entirely up to you. Me personally, I'm 6 foot, about 200 pounds. I run one atmospheric pressure, about 14 PSI in my tire. Because what you want is you want that tire pressure to be as low as possible, especially when you're learning. You want that tire pressure to be as low as possible without touching the bead. You want it to deform and flatten as much as possible, because the electric unicycle has you covered leaning forward and back, but not at all side to side, which is where you get the tire deformation is the only way to get more stability that way. But you don't ever want to touch the bead. You don't want that bead to ever touch the ground. So you got to find that Goldilocks zone of having it as low as possible, but even in the worst scenario of hitting a bump or a really short curb, you don't want it to touch the bead. That's how you lose beads, and that's how you get damage. And now another nice thing about having actual motorcycle grade tires on here is out here in the desert, we have a lot of pokey things. And probably the worst one are these goat head thorns. You can walk 2 feet through the grass and have your shoes entirely covered in these goat head thorns. And they are literally as sharp and durable as thumbtacks, except they have 4 sides to them instead of 1. They absolutely destroy mountain bike tires. There's not a mountain bike tire out there that can survive these goat head thorns. But motorcycle tires, especially these trials tires that always have the lugs pointing towards the ground, they've been holding up amazingly. I set my tire pressure at 1 bar yesterday, and before today's video, I checked it again. It was at 1.02 bar. I was totally expecting that a tire being full of goat head thorns was going to lose pressure. But just to be sure, I ordered some tire slime. Now, tire slime came out with a new slime. Tire slimes always had they started with just the green label, and then they got the red label and blue label, and now they have a new black label, which is their most aggressive compound yet, and it's rated for tubes. That's the important thing, because a lot of EUCs use tube type tires. So I'm going to add that to my tire, even though there's no leaks yet, just as a precaution, because the last thing I want to be is about 20 miles from home or 20 miles from wherever I unloaded at and getting a flat tire and having to walk 20 miles back or whatever. So slime your tires, or whatever brand you want to use. Just make sure that it is tube type rated. One thing that I'd like to bring up is, while you're learning how to ride an electric unicycle, you are going to get tired. It is a leg workout, mostly your ankles, which is not something that you normally work out. So treat it like a workout. Eat protein afterwards, anything that helps speed up recovery, because if you can go at it day after day, about an hour or 2 a day, you're going to pick it up within a week.